Join me now to talk more about this disturbing case from the great state of Michigan, trial attorney Jamie White. Jamie, thanks for joining us. This is a really difficult case to get your head around because this is a young woman that, by all accounts, doesn't have any enemies, seems to have, her life pretty much in check. She just moved back to Michigan from living in Vegas and LA. I guess, she was a professional poker player, had some success on the circuit, but, kind of coming home and ends up with this guy and then ends up dead in such a horrific manner. First, give us a sense of how much attention this case is getting there in Michigan. I would think that this is a pretty high-profile case.
It is. Ted, thanks for having me. This case has gotten a lot of attention over the course of the last several months. We have a young woman, and I don't know that you mentioned this in your intake, but this is a young woman that, but for COVID, probably would have stayed in California by all popular accounts. She was doing well. She was making some money. She had a lot of friends. And as a result of COVID, the casinos shut down and her livelihood became estranged. And then she found herself back here in Michigan, and before long, at least allegedly, found herself in the play of Mr. Morris. What I would say, Ted, though, certainly there are some very disturbing circumstances around this case, and most of the evidence appears to point to Mr. Morris. But for the same reason this is news, Ted, to you and to your viewers and to the people here in Michigan, is the same reason that I think we have to be cautious with drawing judgments on this case. Having represented thousands of people here in the state of Michigan, I've seen this before where, the homeless guy becomes the mule for some level of trafficking, or, he just is there because he serves a role. And I'm not suggesting that's the case here. I'm not defending Mr. Morris, but I do think that we should be cautious to jump to conclusions. The same reasons that this is news on your show is the same reason that we have to look at this cautiously. Why was this 33-year-old beautiful young woman with a convicted 60-some-year-old sex offender who had no resources? I think there's some questions that need to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point. It works both ways. We're like, why are they together? And thinking maybe they weren't together. To your point, maybe
Right.
This guy's the wrong guy. But one of the things that seems compelling is evidence that came from his cell phone. I guess he had a cell phone, and that was brought up at a preliminary hearing. Let's listen to the FBI agent, George Reiner, talking about the defendant, Jeffrey Morris, being in the area where Susie Zhao's body was found.
This is July 13th, 2020 from 2:02 a.m. to 2:17 a.m.
That's correct.
Does this also show in the red box the location where Ms. Zhao's body was discovered later that morning?
It does.
Okay, and there's a home at 7810 Mesa Day Lake Road in Waterford Township, right there on the border between Waterford Township and White Lake, where some video surveillance evidence was obtained in this case, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and there was a vehicle observed going westbound at 2:03 a.m. and then coming eastbound again at 2:10 and 50 seconds a.m. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Okay, does the cell tower information for the defendant's cell phone fall within those time ranges based upon the tower information closest to where the victim's body was found?
It is consistent with that information.
Jamie, one of the really disturbing facts about this case is that she, according to the medical examiner, was burned while she was still alive. Now, whether she was conscious or not is, we don't know. But because of the they examined her lungs, she was alive when she was burned. What does it tell you about that? To your point earlier, it almost seems as though this is someone who is really a nasty dude or group of people that just does not care about this person at all. What do you take from that fact alone that maybe could be used to Morris's favor?
Well, I guess my first impression, Ted, is that this probably was not the most well thought out crime. When you get into a situation, when people are being tortured and burned alive, that probably was not your original plan. I suspect there was some level of desperation on whoever perpetrated this. But I guess what I would encourage your viewers and everybody involved in this case to look at is, the prosecutors spent a significant amount of time. And look, I'm not defending Morris here, but if we're going to look at this from both sides of the fence, why? We spent 5 hours in a preliminary examination, and I didn't hear any forensic evidence tying Mr. Morris to the bloodstains in the hotel, tying him to any physical evidence associated with the bat. I'm not going to go into detail on your program because of the graphic nature associated with the allegations around the bat. But I would just say that I have not heard anything to suggest there's any physical evidence attributing Mr. Morris to the bat. And we know that the victim in this matter was sexually assaulted in a very gruesome way. And we have not heard any evidence that he is connected to that sexual assault, by way of forensics. So again, there appears to be certainly an aura of suspicion around Mr. Morris, and I'm not here to defend him. That's not why I'm here today. But I just think that, again, the reason this is news is the reason we should take a careful look at this. And after 5 hours of testimony, we really have an accumulation of circumstantial evidence to a homeless man with no resources that somehow had access to this woman and was able to pull this off. So to your point about the cell phones, sure. I don't think there's any reasonable person that is going to dispute that these two did not have some form of relationship, whatever that ends up being. But to jump to the conclusion that he had the resources, wherewithal, and knowledge to pull this off in the way that it was done, I just think that it deserves, I think it deserves a very careful look on the part of law enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely, because it just doesn't make sense where, this guy who's supposedly homeless would have access to the accelerant, the bat, the hotel,
Right.
and her in the first place.
Right.
And that other theory, when you take away the physical evidence, that does make you think. The judge in this case, Morris asked for bail. The judge said no to that. Morris is being represented by a, I would assume, a public defender in this
Right.
case. Are you concerned that he's going to get the level of help he needs, if indeed he may not be the guy?
Yes, I think that's always a concern when you're dealing with indigent defendants in a case like this, where we're dealing with, as I've already indicated, I think significant forensic issues. The state of Michigan has spent a lot of money, a lot of time over the course of the last 36 months trying to address the inequities associated with court-appointed counsel. I'm not familiar with his counsel as an individual. But this is absolutely a concern. And, without the appropriate representation, all of these questions that I've brought up will not be addressed. That is very, very troubling. And Ted, I will just reiterate, anybody that's practiced criminal law or has been in law enforcement, or just common sense, people use these guys, these homeless individuals, as straw men. They use them as fall men. I don't know if that's what happened here. I'm not suggesting it did, but to overlook that as a possibility, I think, is an extreme mistake on the part of law enforcement in this particular set of circumstances.
All right, well noted. It is a trial we are obviously following. Jamie White, thank you for your time tonight and your insight from Michigan.